All right. Well, thanks for joining, everyone. I am sorry about all the technical difficulties. It's my first time trying to use these streaming softwares, and it wasn't sharing any of my clips. And so I just had to choose another one. Hopefully, people will be able to join and watch the webinar now. Um, just letting you guys know, if you guys comment on the Facebook group, I am not going to be able to see. You have to go to the page. Let me just comment that right now. If you guys comment inside the Facebook group, I won't be able to see it. Please go to the Facebook page to ask questions. Okay. Same thing for YouTube. If you guys are watching on YouTube, you will need to ask questions directly on using the feature. So yeah, let's get started right away then. Sharing my screen. All right, let's get started. So if you guys are here, actually, could you guys just comment maybe that you're here, hello, where you're joining from, so that I just know that you guys are here and I'm not just talking to a blank screen? That would be amazing. Please do so, because if nobody's watching, then I might as well just create a video instead. All right. Oh, hi, Assam. You're good. Awesome. So it looks like there's a bit of lag, but that's fine. I will get started right away. So PGWP in Canada Masterclass, the whole point of today's webinar is going to be to teach you guys how to actually prepare a robust PGWP application so that you don't get any refusals. If you've been in our group for some time now, you'll see that, we've received quite a lot of refusals. A lot of people have been mentioning that, unfortunately, due to, usually it has to do with the language test result, but everyone's been getting refusals. It's horrible. And so hopefully by doing this webinar, you guys will be able to follow through, submit an application that is comprehensive and not receive a refusal. So, disclaimer, I am not your immigration consultant. This is for general purposes. This does not mean that we have a client-consultant relationship. The agenda for today is we're going to be going over the law and regulations on what PGWP is and what the officers use to really assess your application. And so we take a look at eligibility, compliance, customizing your document checklist based on your needs, filling out the actual M5710 form, writing the effective submission letter if you need it, and then tracking your application and follow-up. And after you actually apply, what do you do to maintain compliance, so like working and etc., and then what would you do if you're actually refused? Just a little bit of a background about me. I am the owner of Migration Immigration with my wife. We're also the admin of PGWP Canada, the group. I specialize in PGWP, but I work with my wife. She, specializes in employer relationships as well as permanent residency. And so if you guys work with us, we'll be able to help out through your entire immigration journey, really. We're located in Burnaby, BC, and for the last 4 consecutive years, we've won awards for being kind of the best rated one in this area. For all of our years in business, we haven't received a single review under 5 stars, and I believe it's because we do focus on quality over quantity. PGWP approval vs refusal rates. It's something just to quickly cover. PGWP approvals are generally high. Just a couple of years ago, it used to be around 98% approval rates. Reason behind that is most people don't mess up, and the eligibility criteria is quite simple to understand. It's changed recently in the sense that they are now putting in all the CIP codes and the language results and not really updating how their document checklist looks like. And so the rates have fallen, but not by much. It's gone down to 96%. And so it's not a huge deal, but you guys should be paying attention because if refused, there are severe consequences. As you see everybody in the group, if you're refused once, the processing timeline is so long you're no longer eligible for a PGWP. So let's take a look at the law and the regulation actually behind the application. It's very important to get started with the base of things so you understand where you're building your application from. So IRPA, Immigration Refugee Protection Act, is the actual law behind Canada. It lists like the objectives and the overarching, theme of immigration. The regulations, IRPR, is kind of teaching you how to apply the law itself. And so it's kind of like a human anatomy where the law is a skeleton that sets, the shape, and then the regulations is the muscles that actually get you moving. So examples of IRPA, they're going to be setting the objectives. And so specifically for PGWP, it's to help Canada have economic benefits of immigration, to facilitate temporary workers for purposes such as trade, commerce, etc. It sets, standards for who is a foreign national and who's allowed to come to Canada and what process they need to go through. And so I'm going to skip through this because obviously it's not that important for you to understand in depth. The regulations teach you how to apply the law itself. And so, you take a look at restoration of status. So people that are refused and lose status, what is restoration of status? What allows for it? The regulations do. Specifically as well, how to extend your stay in Canada. It goes over maintain status, right? After you apply for your PGWP, what allows you to continue working in Canada, working without a permit. This section would cover that. So if you really want to dive into the details, these are the things that you would really focus on as an immigration consultant to really understand what argument am I making to the officer and how am I confident that I'm right, right? Key thing that a lot of people mess up with when they get PGWP refusals or when they have non-compliance issues is also taking a look at sections like this. A foreign national who's engaged in unauthorized study or work, so let's say you work without authorization, or has failed to comply with the condition of a previous permit. So if you're a student, you weren't actively studying, you had a leave of absence that wasn't authorized. What happens then? They have specific things. A period of 6 months has elapsed since the cessation of the unauthorized work or study or failure to comply with the condition. That would be an exception. And so if refused, you have to take a look at things like this, not just reapply. You need to make a case for yourself using the regulations available. Now that we have an understanding of what the law itself is and what the regulations are, let's assess the eligibility and compliance for portion. Um, the things that you need to look for when you are actually submitting a PGWP application is the links that are actually on screen right now. And so the key thing is you need to understand the conditions of a study permit holder. The conditions of a study permit holder, mean that you are enrolled in studies, that you're not working above the hours allowed, you are studying, actively studying and making progress. Things like that are all study permit conditions. Study permit conditions are one of the number one reasons that people get refused for PGWPs. And this is the hard part because most people don't actually even know what the conditions are of a study permit holder. And so I really urge you, when you are making your PGWP application, you look through the conditions of a study permit holder. This page gives you all the examples and what you need to know. And so you need to make sure that you have complied with the conditions of a study permit holder in Canada. Then moving on, for a study permit holder, the link that we just took a look at is the link that is given to you as applicants to kind of rely on. But there are something called operational instructions. These are instructions actually used by officers and staff to assess your applications. And so if you take a look at one of the operational instructions, let's say working on campus, it'll actually show you that this section contains policy, procedures, guidance used by IRCC staff. And it gives a full description of all the different things based on, working on campus, what allows for it, who's allowed, who's not, etc. And so you have to take a look. If you worked on campus, take a look at this. Worked off campus, take a look at that. Co-op work permits as well as study permit conditions. This D is very important. This is probably where most of the people end up messing up. So really read through this section when you are going through it. Today, as we go through the application, we'll obviously be touching on it. And then when it comes to actually doing the PGWP part of the application, client facing again, you have IRCC instruction guides, which is basically what you guys will be using to take, look at, what's the general eligibility, who can apply, etc. So this is good enough. It does provide you with enough information to submit an application. But if you require a little bit more detail, you're confused about something, then look for the operational instructions for officers. And so if you take a look at LMI exemption code C43, PGWP, it gives you all the information: place of application, receipt of application, eligibility criteria, what documentary evidence is required, and then assessing all of the different things that officers need to assess in making approval and how they make that decision at the end of the day. And so this is going to be a very powerful page for you to kind of look at. I know it's long, I know it's a lot of words, but take the time to read through it to ensure that you're not jeopardizing your future here in Canada. Work permit issuance prohibitions. This one is important if you have any compliance issues. So you anticipate that potentially your application is going to be refused. This section goes over what happens when you haven't complied with the conditions of your stay by, working without authority or status or study. So it gives you specific situations. It also gives you examples of, when or when not specific exemptions apply. And so read through it, because this is where things start getting really complicated. A lot of people say PGWP is super simple. It's true for 90% of the cases. But once there's a complication, it's so complex because it has so many exceptions that are not used for other work permits. It's a very special work permit. Like, normally speaking, for PGWP, you apply, you leave the country for vacation, you come back, you're still allowed to work. But if it's another type of work permit, you're not allowed to do so. You cannot leave Canada, come back, and start working. And so things like that are very, very difficult to know in advance without having an understanding. So assessing eligibility, the key things that you need to keep in mind is, obviously, you've never received the PGWP before. You can only have one PGWP in your entire lifetime. If you lost your status, so let's say that your study permit expired before you could apply for the PGWP, you have to either have valid status or be within 90 days of eligibility to restore status. So if you lose status, you have 90 days to kind of fix that status issue. So you can apply for a PGWP. The only thing you need to watch out for then is, did I study after my study permit expired? Did I work at all? And that could be construed as non-compliance, right? Work without authorization or study without authorization. So that's where sometimes you do need to take a deeper look. By the way, guys, everyone that's watching the video right now, if you guys have any questions that do pop up, just write them in chat. Again, you do need to write it in the Facebook page instead of the Facebook group that I've posted this on, because the group doesn't send me the what's it called, the chat messages. The next one is, it needs to be 8 months long. You need to have studied at a DLI, and that program has to be PGWP eligible. This is something that your DLI can confirm for you, so it's not something you need to pay too much attention to. Number 4, have maintained full-time student status during each academic session. And so basically, you need to be studying full-time in every single semester except for the final one, okay? And so that's the key thing you need to keep in mind. I got a question here about a SOWP. Guys, keep in mind this is a PGWP webinar, and so I'm not going to be replying to anything that doesn't have to do with PGWPs right now, okay? So Yeah, part-time study is allowed in the final semester. Some people have, let's say, taken a final semester that's part-time and failed one of the courses and had to do another final semester. There is in the operational instruction, so the guide for officers, it does specifically state that in those situations, both final semesters are considered final. And so you do need to specifically mention things like that, because if you take a look at like federal court decisions, judicial review, there have been some judges that have sent the like they refused the JR because they said it's not a final semester. But the IRCC guide now specifically states that it is. And so always paying attention to little details like that. You need to apply for a PGWP within 180 days of receiving written confirmation that you completed your studies. And so basically, this is the thing that messes up a lot of people that are refused, is if you are refused and your processing time is beyond 180 days, it's usually a point where it's 180 days after you've finished your studies. And so at that point in time, even if you're allowed to reapply, you wouldn't be eligible. So you need to make your first application the right one for PGWPs. The other second thing that a lot of people forget is number 6. You have to have held a valid study permit at some point within the 180 days before submitting your PGWP application. This, a lot of people just combine with number 5, but it is not the same thing, because having a valid study permit is different from when you finish your studies. Being admissible to Canada, this one has to do with the non-compliance factors. So like you can be inadmissible to Canada for medical reasons, security concerns, criminality, but mostly for PGWP, the key thing you're taking a look at is non-compliance with the conditions of your stay in Canada. And then the new rules that were announced in 2025 is the eligibility requirements based on your program of study. So if you studied at a bachelor's, master's, or doctorate degree level, you need to have CLB level 7. Other university programs, same CLB 7, plus you need to have a field of study requirement, unless you applied for a study permit before November 1st, 2024. And again, a lot of you have started your studies before November 1st, 2024. And so you need to say this in your submission letter, in your application somewhere, because sometimes the officer makes mistakes. And then if they make a mistake, you still cannot work once you're refused. And so you need to make sure that you provide all the information possible for the officer. Isam, I think you asked the question, what does it mean 24 hours a week? If you don't work ever at all, 2 semester, but I have no idea what the question is. Can you use ChatGPT to kind of fix the thought and repost that question, and I will answer to the best of my ability. Next thing, assessing compliance. So this is one of the key reasons why you get refused for applications, even though you meet the eligibility criteria. So when you take a look at assessing PGWP applications, there's eligibility, which is, do I meet the requirements to submit an application? But then there's also inadmissibility. So this has to do with the compliance factors. If you mess up here, you might be inadmissible, and then you would be refused even though you're eligible for the program. So some common non-compliance issues that we see with PGWP applicants is they failed multiple courses throughout their program. So let's say they're doing a 4-year bachelor's degree. They graduate in 8 years because they're failing so many courses. What happens then is the officer can assess that you haven't been making active progress in your study, so actively studying during your stay in Canada, and for that reason, they might give you a non-compliance finding and refuse your application for that reason. Authorized leave of absence or authorized leave longer than 150 days. So if you plan on stopping your studies for any reason, you need to gain approval from your school. Sometimes people don't get that authorization, and so that would be considered unauthorized. So you're not actively pursuing studies in Canada. And again, that's non-compliant with the conditions of your stay in Canada. So it can lead to refusal unless addressed. And then sometimes some people get authorized leave, but it can be only for a period of 150 days, but they surpass it and risk refusal again. Working without authorization. This is another big one. Everyone knows you can't work without authorization, but what does that actually mean? Is sometimes students work beyond the normal permitted hours, let's say 24 hours a week off campus during regularly scheduled sessions. That's not compliant unless you have like a co-op work permit and you're working on your co-op. Working while you're studying part-time. Somebody decides, I want to study part-time this semester, and they start working. You're not allowed to work if you're not a full-time student. So then again, you're working without authorization. Sometimes people get authorized leave of absence and then they come back during the summer semester and then they start working because they think, oh, well, I'm back on the summer semester. So I'm like, it's a scheduled break, so I can work however much I want, right? No, because the semester before was not attended. You cannot start working until the next semester actually starts. And so that's work again without authorization. Some people receive their letter of completion, forget that they need to stop working immediately. That's another issue. Working after applying for a PGWP when not eligible to work. There are specific conditions that need to be met for you to have the eligibility to work immediately after submitting a PGWP. But some people, let's say, applied for a study permit extension, they're on maintain status and they apply for a PGWP. Those people are not allowed to work after they apply for the PGWP. Now they start working, now they're no longer compliant, and so the officer has to refuse the application. Overstaying or loss of status, so failing to extend your status on time, losing status because you didn't extend it, or not restoring your status within 90 days after losing status. All of these things are compliance issues that you need to keep in mind. Olua, let's see what your question is. Can you explain the eligibility 2, 5, and 6 better? Okay, yeah, let's go back to that. 2, 5, and 6. 2, have valid status or be within 90 days of eligibility of restoring status. So a valid status means that you have a valid study permit or a work permit or whatever status. It could be visitor, student, worker. And let's say that you no longer have status because you forgot to extend it. Then you have 90 days to restore status in Canada. And so you need to be within either that 90 days or have valid status. That's what 2 is. Number 5 is apply for a PGWP within 180 days of receiving written confirmation that you completed your studies. And so the written confirmation is usually going to be a letter of completion from your DLI. However, it could also be the final transcript or even the diploma, degree, or certificate. It's whatever the DLI sends you that confirms you've completed your program. And it's whatever the first message is. And so a lot of people also make mistakes here because they receive like an email and they don't think that's, confirmation of completion of studies, and they continue working and it's not compliant. Finally, number 6, have held a valid study permit at some point within the 180 days, a day period before submitting your PGWP application. So this one is a little bit different from 5, in that number 5 is you need to apply within 180 days of completing your studies. And then number 6 is 180 days before you submit your PGWP, you must have held a study permit at some point. And so, this is a little bit different. A lot of people are going to have this requirement be kind of overlapping, but there are specific situations where it doesn't. And if you don't understand it, then it can really mess you up. So thanks for the question. And then Isam, thanks for asking again. What does a 24-hour per week mean? If you did not work at all during 2 semesters and later it happens that you work 25 hours in a given week, would this be a problem? Well, if you work 25 hours when you're only allowed to work 24, yes, it is a problem. So that would be non-compliance with the conditions of your study permit, basically. So let's move on to the document checklist. So the document checklist is supposed to be customized for everyone. And so you're not supposed to just follow through with whatever the checklist that the IRCC Secure Account or GCKey gives you. Based on your unique situation, you need to customize it. And so this is where a lot of people mess up. A lot of people are getting their PGWPs refused because they're like, oh, they never asked me for an IELTS or CELPIP exam, and so I didn't upload it. How is that my fault? But that's what leads to refusal. So let's take a look from the very beginning then. The application form, give me one sec. Okay, so IM5710 application form. Guys, my Facebook video is showing up as it's loading right now. Are you guys able to still hear me? Um, just want to confirm that the live is still going on. If you guys hear me, can you just write yes or whatever? Anyways, while you guys do that, I will continue with the webinar because I know there's a delay. Application forms that you're going to need is an M5710 form. The M5710 form is the work permit application form. It's the same form that's used for LMIA-based work permits, LMI-exempt work permits. It's for all work permits. And so, again, you need to know how to fill it out based on the instructions given to you. M5257 is a Schedule 1. This is for only people that are required to submit it, and it's for people that in the background declaration section at the very end of the M5710 form, let's say you had like military or you answer yes to any one of those questions, then you need to supply a Schedule 1. Identity documents are going to be passport, digital photo, your current status document. Those are all three things that I definitely recommend that you supply in the application. What is... Okay. Are you guys able to hear me? Because I'm not sure. Nobody's saying anything, so I don't know if the live is still ongoing. But you know what? I'll keep going in case you guys are watching. You need to prove that your program has been completed. And so this can be in the form of a degree, diploma, or certificate, which usually comes the latest. And I mean, there's the letter of completion that usually comes the earliest. And then, thought so. That's why. So it is not streaming. Goodness, how annoying it is when it doesn't work. Oh yeah, I see. Guys, give me one moment. I am going to end stream and then I will re-stream it so that you guys can join maybe.